Today we're looking at Martin Luther King Jr. Hello, welcome to the Daily Bellringer, and please don't forget to subscribe and take a look at the questions down in the description. Each year on the third Monday in January, our nation pauses to remember a great American and leader, Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Day, or MLK Day, became an official holiday in February of 1983 and was first officially celebrated in 1986. Martin Luther King's birthday was on January 15th, and although the holiday does not always necessarily fall exactly on his birthday, it is celebrated as a day to honor the civil rights leader. Martin Luther King Jr. was born January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, the middle child of Michael King Sr. and Alberta Williams King. His birth name was Michael King Jr. after his father. In 1931, his father, Michael King Sr., became the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. Soon after, in 1934, Michael King Sr. changed his name to Martin Luther in honor of the German Protestant leader, and likewise his son, Martin Luther King Jr., took on the name. He went to Booker T. Washington High School in Atlanta and was an extremely intelligent student, so much so that he skipped the 9th and 11th grades and began attending Morehouse College at the age of only 15. While in college, King decided to follow in his father's footsteps and become a pastor. He graduated in 1948 from Morehouse College and then went on to Kosher Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania to train to become a minister. After graduating from Kosher, he then went on to pursue a doctoral degree at Boston University. And it was while attending Boston University that he met Coretta Scott. And in 1953, they were married and would go on to have 4 children together. In 1954, King became the pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church of Montgomery, Alabama, and then finished his doctoral degree the following year. And he did all of this by the time he was only 25 years old. Now, throughout all of King's life, he had experienced racial discrimination, with many southern states having what were called Jim Crow laws in place that sought to segregate African Americans from whites. There were separate water fountains, bathrooms, seating areas in restaurants, and separate schools for whites to attend and separate schools for African Americans to attend. State governments claimed that these different facilities were separate but equal, but the clear fact was facilities for African Americans were not funded well and by no means were equal. These discriminatory laws, which stretched all the way back to the Civil War, were basically accepted by Southern society, and of course King, rightly so, saw these laws as being wrong and there needed to be change. Shortly after King moved to Montgomery, Alabama in December of 1955, Rosa Parks boarded a city bus and took a seat. Soon the bus was full, and by city code, African Americans had to give up their seats on city buses to white passengers. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, and she was arrested. That evening, several African American community leaders met to organize a boycott of the Montgomery bus system. They chose Martin Luther King to be the leader of the boycott, and for over a year, King led the charge in boycotting the system and arguing for fair treatment of African Americans. All the while, King and African Americans had to endure harassment and violence from those opposed to their efforts. King's house was even attacked. But by December of 1956, courts had ruled that the city's segregated bus rules were unconstitutional and violated the 14th Amendment. It was a major victory in the civil rights movement and brought King into the national spotlight as a leader of the movement. But there were still many more changes that needed to be made, and King was ready to be a leading voice for change. King stressed the importance of nonviolence as he aided in organizing protests against unfair laws and practices. In fact, King was arrested 29 times, most times on charges of civil disobedience, but King never fought back at those arresting him. In 1963, King was arrested while helping to lead a protest in downtown Birmingham, Alabama. While in jail, he wrote his famous Letter from Birmingham Jail, which again stressed the power of nonviolent protest as a means of creating change. In August of 1963, King traveled to Washington, D.C. to speak at the March on Washington, in which over 200,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial to argue for racial justice. There, King arguably gave his most famous speech, the I Have a Dream speech, in which he discussed his belief that someday all races would be treated equally. And in 1964, he became the youngest person ever to receive the Nobel Peace Prize at the age of only 35. Also in 1964, King was instrumental in getting the Civil Rights Act passed, which prohibited discrimination based on race, color, sex, or religion. And in 1965, he would aid in the famous Civil Rights March from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. For the next few years, King traveled the country giving speeches and helping to lead the movement for change. But on April 3, 1968, while in Memphis, Tennessee, King was shot and killed by an assassin while standing outside of his hotel room. He was only 39 years old. In 2011, the Martin Luther King Memorial was opened in Washington, D.C. as a monument to the legacy of Martin Luther King. The 30-foot-tall statue of King stands as a reminder of the injustices that have been overcome and the hope for a future in which all people, regardless of their race, will be treated equally. So with that, hopefully you learned something, and thanks for watching.